Hey team, how is everybody doing this lovely Wednesday? Hi Secular Rarity, hi Epsilon is greater than. I'm super glad to have you guys in chat. Okay, so while folks are coming in, I'm gonna do my favorite way to start off a Wednesday pseudoscience debunk live stream, which is by doing a weather briefing. So team, it is June 2nd, right? Hurricane season, the Atlantic hurricane season officially started yesterday, and we're still in the middle of like prime severe weather storm season out here in the plains. Also, hello, Command Cyborg. So let's just take a quick look at both the severe weather, the convective outlook, and then we'll take a look at what hurricanes are going on, what tropical storm activity we have. Hint, it's not much, but I do like that I can show you guys some of the resources that I like. So we looked at this last week. This is National Weather Service's convective outlook, one-day convective outlook. Nothing particularly exciting happening. There is a slight sort of possibility for thunderstorms down in south central Texas. Everywhere else, like looking at that green, that's just like, it might be a little rainy and sad, but this is not bode of like scary, intense storms. This is just kind of, some people might get some rain kind of outlook. So that's pretty happy. And we are getting into June. So as the summer goes on, it will be those types of thunderstorms that like produce tornadoes that are really severe. Those get harder and harder to make the later we get into the summer. There's kind of a perfect window with spring, late spring, early summer. Not impossible, but just a little harder to do. So there's that. And let's take a look at Atlantic hurricanes. So like I said, tropical cyclone activity is not expected during the next 48 hours. So the website we're on right now, this is the National Hurricane Center's website. So that's NHC, National Hurricane Center, nhc.noaa.gov. That'll take you right here. And you can see they've got 3 different basins. So the Atlantic, there's nothing exciting happening in the Atlantic in terms of tropical storms or hurricanes. So that's good. And then let's take a look at the Eastern Pacific. So the US is cool. West Coast. So if there is something going on, it'll show up like this. So this is Tropical Depression Blanca. And Tropical Depression Blanca. So just so you know, in order to have a name, something had to have at least been a tropical storm, right? So a tropical depression, it gets a number. Then if it becomes a tropical storm, it gets a name. So then after it gets a name, if it goes back down to tropical depression status, then it keeps its name. So Blanca there probably was a tropical storm a day or 2 ago. Also, hello. Hi, Rebecca and Robert Adset. Thank you guys so much for joining and hanging out. But I think this is really cool. So if we wanted to know more about like this tropical depression, we could click on it and it would take it to its forecast. This is more useful it's heading out towards the open ocean, right? That's why Pacific tropical storms are generally, at least Pacific tropical storms close to the US, are not really things that we're worried about because they generally move away from people unless you're a Hawaii. So that's where we're going to jump over to the Central Pacific. So there's Hawaii, no cyclone activity expected in the next 48 hours. So that is awesome. But yeah, that's now that it's hurricane season, I like to, at least Atlantic Basin hurricane season, I like to keep an eye on this stuff. And it's a great place to go to get information kind of straight from the horse's mouth. You guys know my feelings about some weather outlets, specifically any ones that are on like for-profit networks, right? I don't think they always give the best, most accurate information. This is where I go to get my best, most accurate information. Okay. That was a couple minutes, right? Hopefully anybody that's going to show up or is able to get here to the start is here. And so, boy howdy team, do I have a treat for y'all tonight. So tonight in our Wednesday night pseudoscience debunk live stream, we're going to do some more climate change skepticism, climate change denier debunk stuff. And so I found, I stumbled upon the Heartland Institute, which is a think tank based out of, a conservative think tank based out of Chicago. And they've got some hot takes on stuff, and they seem real intent about like talking about climate change, and don't know why that's a thing. But I thought we might start with their video on the Antarctic ice sheet. So fun facts to know and tell: the Antarctic ice sheet is actually growing in some places and decreasing in others, unlike the Arctic ice. Excuse me, I said ice sheet. I'm kind of talking about sea ice specifically. Antarctic sea ice is growing in some places. Is this sponsored? I think this is, I'm not surprised that it's sponsored by the Koch brothers. I didn't dig too deep into the Heartland Institute. I like to save a lot of my like feelings and reactions for you guys here. Because that's what makes live streams fun, right? I'm 0% surprised to learn that this is Koch brothers though. Okay, so first of all, real fast, in Antarctica, there is the Antarctic ice sheet, right, which is freshwater ice that is over the surface of Antarctica. And then there is Antarctic sea ice. And I actually think it's the sea ice that's growing, not the ice sheet. I don't see how the ice sheet would grow. I could be wrong on that, but like these are two different things, right? The ice sheet and sea ice. Sea ice is in the ocean. It is frozen ocean water. The Antarctic ice sheet is frozen fresh water on land, on the land mass of Antarctica. So let's see which one they're talking about and see if they cite sources. Do you guys want to take bets on whether or not they're going to cite sources? Because my bet would be no. All right. Let's take a look. If you guys can't hear the audio, let me know. I think I finally figured out StreamYards and I'm going to be broadcasting the audio, but anyhow.
Andy with the Heartland Institute.
Oh, of course it's going to play an ad. I'll mute that for you guys. Oh, never mind. Okay.
So it's 2021 and we can finally cancel one of the alarmist arguments. Welcome to the party, climate alarmists. Us here on our side have been getting canceled for years. I mean,
that's because your hot takes suck, man. So Robert, growing after a large chunk broke off. Oh, sorry, wrong one. There we go. So there are actually places that like the average sea ice extent in Antarctica, there's a few places where it's actually increasing and not decreasing. This is because there are places in Antarctica where the temperature is predominantly moderated by long-term ocean currents. So ocean currents take longer to change than atmospheric stuff does. So that gives us a simple way to think about it is that it's sort of like a built-in time delay for climate change. So I don't know exactly how long the time delay is, so I'm going to make up a reasonable number here, right? So basically think that there are parts of Antarctica's coast where the temperature there is reflective of the climate from, say, 50 years ago, not the climate as it is now, because things moderated by ocean currents are naturally just going to change slower. Also, we understand the atmosphere better than we understand ocean currents. Ocean currents are kind of complicated because they take place over a really long period of time. There are some ocean currents that take 2,000 years to complete. So obviously we have not observed a full ocean current, right? A full, circuit of one of these. And oceans are pretty hard to study because they're in the middle of nowhere, right? How do you get people there to look at it, and how do you get instruments out there? So anything that's related to the ocean is just harder to study than even the atmosphere. So I hope that answers your question. So it's a little more complicated than that. Also, we don't anticipate that this Antarctic ice growth, one, it's like just a little bit, it's not a whole lot. And two, we don't think that's going to continue to be the case for very long. Okay. Cool. Let's keep playing this. He's going to complain about cancel culture, I guess. Dude, you have a YouTube channel like with 35,000 subscribers. You have not been canceled.
First, Parler was just kicked off the entire internet. It was removed from all the app stores. Amazon Web Services fully removed it.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, yeah, our side's been dealing with this for years, but welcome to the party. Also, interesting sidebar here, but most of my friends are left-leaning, and they all say that the right wing are the ones that are engaging in cancel culture. I don't know, those of you that watch this
video, my gosh, I don't.
Antarctica.
Okay.
That it's been getting warmer and warmer, and all the sea ice is melting. Time to end that argument. So the study we're about to talk about comes from one of the most prominent science journals in the world. Great. It cancels the claim that Antarctica is warming and that the ice sheet is melting. Actually, Antarctica hasn't warmed in the last 70 years, and the ice sheet is actually expanding. Writing in the journal Nature, scientists at Columbia University and the University of Victoria, British Columbia, report the Antarctic continent has not warmed in the last 7 decades, despite a monotonic increase in the atmospheric concentration of greenhouse gases.
Okay. So I might try to dig into that paper here in a second. Let's see if they cite the paper. That would be great. No, they just take it to climaterealism.com. Cool. But again, Antarctica specifically, its temperature is moderated by ocean currents. So that's sort of not unexpected. That's not an unexpected result. It is odd, but it's not unexpected. And it also doesn't take away the dramatic changes in temperature that you see just about everywhere else, right? Okay. Also, he's already mixed. He's already said sea ice once, and then he said the Antarctic ice sheet. Robert, no, right? Like, no one's arguing this. Also, I'm pretty sure that he doesn't know the difference between sea ice and the Antarctic ice sheet because he's said both, and one paper wouldn't address both, right? Those are completely different fields. I study Arctic sea ice. I know almost nothing about land ice, right? Like, I've never looked at that. So these are completely different processes. So I'm interested to see if he's actually talking about sea ice or the land ice, the ice sheet. So you're right. This definitely seems like a straw man. And the gotcha here is I don't think he knows the difference between these types of ices because he's mixed them up once. So let's see what else he has to say.
The scientists also observed that over the past several decades, Antarctic sea ice has modestly expanded.
Okay, so Antarctic sea ice has modestly expanded. Oh, okay, sweet. They're going to show us. He's got a figure coming up. So let's take a look.
So this chart shows how temperatures have changed.
Blah, blah, blah. That's fine. I can read this plot for y'all. Great. Okay, so what we're looking at here is average temperature in Kelvin. And so what they took is 30-year means are what we consider to be climatological means. So taking a 30-year mean is a pretty standard thing. So if you'll notice, what they did was they took the average of temperature over Antarctica from 1984 to 2014, so that 30-year period, and then they subtracted off the climatological mean of 1950 to 1980. So just kind of looking, so if you take those big averages, you're going to wash out smaller timescale differences, which is really cool. And Straka, by the way, you're absolutely right. Like, there's no contradiction. The average temperature of the whole planet can be going up and one place be an outlier, right? It's a really common climate skeptic thing to like point to, but this one place is getting colder, or but this one place hasn't showed any warming, as like supposed to be like some gotcha, but like that doesn't debunk, that doesn't break the behavior of the average. One thing I like to say is like, okay, imagine, so I am 5'7", right? I am like the average height of an American woman, right? But I personally know women who are like less than 5 feet tall and as tall as 6'3", right? But our average is still 5'7". If over the course of my lifetime, the average height of women in America went up from 5'7" to 5'8", that means overall, as a population, we're getting taller, but that 5-foot flat woman doesn't cease to exist, right? So this is such a common tactic for climate change deniers and climate skeptics, but it's either dishonest, and I don't like to attribute things to malice, which we can attribute to ignorance, right? So it's either, if it's not malice, then it's a deep misunderstanding of how like averages work, right? Also, if you guys notice, the paper is talking about sea ice. He was talking about the Antarctic ice sheet. So he doesn't even know the difference between those two things. So specifically, the Antarctic ice sheet would be on land, right? And then the sea ice would be on the ocean. So anyway, so what we're seeing here is that over the I said Icelandic, goodness, I've had the Arctic on my brain. Over the Antarctic landmass, it looks like temperatures have generally stayed the same or perhaps even gotten colder over here by about 1 to 2 degrees Kelvin. These look between these two periods of time. But there is the specific region over here where it got a lot warmer, but that's a difference of like 8 Kelvin. So yeah, so warming, when it's occurring, it doesn't happen evenly across the whole planet, right? Or across a whole region. Warming and like any temperature changes are going to happen kind of strangely. And one other thing that I will point out here is that so I don't doubt that this paper did good work, but something that like y'all should know is take with a grain of salt any of that data that's coming from the center of Antarctica, right? And this is something that like climate scientists and people that have looked at Antarctica know, but the general public doesn't, because you kind of have to be in the field to know it. There are, I think, 12 weather stations on the continent of Antarctica. So there are about 12 weather stations on Antarctica. So that's, you know, weather stations are going to be like places where we have instruments that are recording temperature and pressure and sometimes launching weather balloons, right? All of those are on the coast, right? So the temperature data that we have for Antarctica, right, apart from satellite data, and I'll talk about that in a second. So the data that we have is going to be like here, 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 here. So everything in the center, especially for that 1950 to 1980 data set, is well, hey, I know the temperature here and I know the temperature here, so let's interpolate and figure out, sort of make a good estimate at what the temperature is going to be between those stations, right? And Antarctica is not small, right? So only having Robert, exactly, no one wants to maintain weather stations in the middle of the continent. That's really not feasible. Like, it's a cost thing. And you can't have people there year round. It is too cold. So yeah, so like we can't put a weather station at the center. So we do rely on satellite data, right? But I will say this, like 12, they have more weather stations clustered further towards the pole in Antarctica than they do in the Arctic. So there's that. But the other thing that we do get is Oh my gosh, Rebecca, if you get to go, I get to go, right? Like you and me will go to Antarctica, we'll set up a weather station. It'll be great. I'm here for it. Um, so, and Robert, about your question about like the ice sheet and the sea ice, it's really best to think of those as just completely independent processes. So they don't interact much. Anyway, okay. Satellites. So satellite data, you don't have satellite data until 1979, right? So, right, whoever made this graph, I'm just gonna, I'm assuming he pulled this from that paper in Nature. Nature is like, the best journal. Nature and Science are the science journals, right? Getting a paper in there is a big deal, and so you can have high confidence in those papers. So, what I'm trying to say here is, like, assuming this came from that paper, right, we can probably trust whoever made this figure, but they're doing the best they can with the data that is available. And it's important. Also, hi, Dapper. I got talking about Antarctica and I missed you. Okay.
Yo.
Oh, I have a co-host. Hooray.
Yeah. Well, I was busy doing math about Noah's Ark, and that was starting to make my head hurt. So then I was like, I'll make my head hurt in a different way this time.
Yeah. I'm talking about what data we have for Antarctica and how far back it goes.
Right.
So satellite data, the earliest satellite data comes from 1979. So the only thing I'm trying to say is that that data from inland Antarctica from 1950 to 1980, they're using the best that we have available, but like that's not great, if that makes sense, right? So take that with a grain of salt. And also, Dapper, thank you so much for coming to hang out. Okay, I finished that train of thought. I wanted to get that out before I lost my mind. How are you today?
Well, I've spent about 9 of the last 12 hours combing through a CMI video, which, yeah, that's how I am. So basically my goal is by the end of tomorrow at the latest, I want to have a script responding to this entire hour-ish long video, which means that I'm cutting some of it out, but that still means that I'm going to have about 3 hours worth of script to read.
Gotcha.
And then I'm just going to read it into a microphone and chop it into a few videos.
Love it. Love it. I have to say, I enjoy doing my debunks live. It's not like the careful takedown. I sort of treat these the way I feel like the seriousness with which way that they deserve, which is having a drink with friends on the internet, right?
Yeah.
But I recognize the value in what you do. I just don't have the patience for it.
One of the things is to debunk some of this stuff, I'd have had to like scrounge through German paleontology articles and creationist websites in Portuguese.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, and I don't know if you know this, but I'm not super great at reading either of those languages.
I can't read either of those. Hi, Scott.
Hey, Scott, dude. I can read enough German and enough Portuguese to know what the topic under discussion is and whether or not I've found the right source. But that's about it. I then
You're
have
better
to
than me, man.
So like I'm reading through all these German things. I'm like looking for like the formation name. I'm like, oh, okay, this is the name of the formation. So I can look up the formation and see where this fossil came from, see what kind of depositional environment it is, and then I can see whether or not the claims the creationists are making about it are right. And of course, they never are.
Gotcha.
So yeah, it's been a weird. Oh, there was a little bit of Russian mixed in too.
Ugh. I do have a friend who reads Russian, so.
Well, that's handy. Actually, I think I might actually have a contact who reads Russian. So if I need it, I might be able to get that done. But yeah, I'm just sitting here wishing that like, could you guys do like English or French or Spanish or maybe even Catalan? My Catalan reading skills are actually fairly good.
Gotcha. You got a question for you in chat. People who cited those read them.
Oh, no. Oh, they didn't even cite them. I had to hunt down the citations via things like reverse image search on Google.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there was one picture that they upped the contrast, raised the white levels on the picture, then inverted the hue, then X mirrored it before they posted it on their video, or actually posted it on like the CMI website.
Oh, so gosh.
I'm trying to image search this, and all that's coming up is creationist creationist websites that don't tell me what the actual genus of this specimen is, so I can't find out where it's from. So I had to finally just look up more generic things like ichthyosaur, and then I found out that, oh yeah, there's a bunch of pictures that are exactly the same, except they're X-mirrored and the color's all wonky. Got it. Thanks,
Gotcha.
guys.
Yes, citation by photo. That's not a valid citation.
That's how the pros do it. Trust me.
Also, if anybody in chat was unaware, you can find me and Dapper playing Dungeons and Dragons every other Monday over on Cheshire Vic's channel. I DM, and you, spoilers, didn't die. I was very proud of you.
I didn't die, although I did look up the instant death rules just to make sure that I hadn't. So anytime I have to look up the instant death rules to make sure, it's a rough day.
That was a rough day. Yeah. Okay. Also, a madman. No, you had Hoven drinking games last night.
Yeah, they're already gone.
The science friends generally time our live stream.
We try, yeah. Although Erica has a premiere that, according to the internet, is like today at like 10 p.m. Pacific, and I'm like, that seems off.
That's not real.
Yeah. But it's about Antarctica.
Okay, yeah, Antarctica. Oh yeah, hers is about Antarctica. Serendipitously, my last scripted video on my channel was about Arctic sea ice, and I didn't get into Antarctic stuff because it was going to make it too long. So I thought for today, I was looking up this common claim that like climate change can't be real because sea ice in Antarctica is growing. One, this guy can't tell the difference between sea ice and an ice sheet, so that's great.
Yeah.
And like didn't bother to Google that. You know what I mean?
Ice on top of rock is not the same as ice on top of water.
Exactly.
Oh, Command Cyborg, it's 2:30 a.m. Rough, man. But thanks for being with us.
Thanks for being with us. Yeah. Okay, so let's. He was about to explain this graph. I explained it instead.
All right. Awesome.
So, here we go.
During the past 30 years, compared to temperatures recorded between 1950
and
over just a small portion of the continent that juts out into the Southern Ocean. The legend on the bottom shows that warming versus cooling is color-coded. Now, the majority of Antarctica is cooling. There are small pockets of warming, as I just mentioned, but the overarching trend is that of cooling.
Okay, my immediate objection is, okay, so I assume this bar chart is measured in degrees Celsius?
Kelvin, but yeah.
Oh, well, okay, those have the same size unit, right?
Right.
Okay, so I'll just say degrees Celsius because I can use the words degree with that, whereas with Kelvin I can't, and it makes me trip up on my words. So
you're good.
So what I'm noticing is that like the cooling areas are like -1 to 2 degrees, and the warming areas are all the way up into like the +8 degrees.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that we can just say, hey, the surface area that's cooling is bigger than the surface area that's warming, therefore it's overall cool. Like, no.
Right.
The degree of warming is an important factor here.
And it's also important to note that we're in this big land blob, right? That's where, especially that 1950 to 1980 data, were a little sus on. So if I was interpreting this, I would say there may be a cooling trend over the continent of Antarctica, but I'm not confident enough in the quality of the data to like, bet on that, right?
Yeah.
So I would guess to say it's probably staying about the same, possibly cooling, but we do see warming out here where, surprise, surprise, we have more reliable data, right? I think this is where is McMurdo Station? Where?
I believe it's up towards the so-called distal end or southern end, or I guess northern edge of that peninsula. But also, I note that this graph excludes the 3 hottest decades on record, which have been the previous 3 decades.
That's true. Yeah. So I don't have a problem with their methodology. I really don't. That's pretty standard for climate science stuff. I need to.
That's fair. And I'm not a climate scientist, but for me, I would be curious to see what the warming trend has been in the 30, plus years since 1980.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay. Yeah. Here, let me share my screen. Here we go. Okay.
Mr. Autopants makes a good point that in the U.S., climate change denial really followed the tobacco denial playbook. Yeah, it's pretty similar, and it's for similar reasons, right? Because there are people who stand to make a lot of money by pretending the problem doesn't exist.
Exactly. So, hey. Oh, no, I think these are summits. I'm not sure. But in theory, there's a station smack dab here, but I know there's not a weather station there. So all I was going to say is, like, if we look around this region, we have there's a good cluster of data of like research stations, right? So,
yeah.
Whereas, and I don't know when all these were, but again, like, you're seeing good data, right? Higher concentration of data, et cetera, so forth. Okay. That was my whole point.
I just asked Google where McMurdo Station is, and they're like, "Would you like driving directions?"
Yes.
Nah, no. I think I will pass on the. Oh, actually, it's like almost due south of New Zealand. Interesting.
Oh, okay, cool.
So it's actually on like the opposite side from the peninsula. Interesting. That is not what I would have guessed.
Okay.
So you can forget the claims that Antarctica is warming and that the ice sheet is melting beyond control.
No.
Again, ice sheet and sea ice are not the same thing.
They're simply not true. Antarctica overall has not warmed in the past 70 years, and the ice sheet has actually modestly expanded. So thank you. We can now welcome...
Not the ice sheet, the sea ice. Sorry, that's driving me nuts.
Yeah.
All right, I think he's just going to try to, like, drop his mic for the rest of this. Okay.
Yeah, I know I only came in for a little bit of it, but like that's very, very frustrating. It's just like it's not a good conclusion. You can't reliably conclude that from that graph. And
right.
Yeah, it's just
no, you can't. And like again, chat got this, right? Like chat listening to me make fun of a video understood that like but one location not following the trend does not debunk the trend.
Yeah, and that's the thing that you see all the time is like any global trend is going to have areas that don't follow the global trend, right? Because the global trend is an average of local trends, which means that basically almost of mathematical necessity, some areas are going to go against the trend, but when you average it out, right?
Exactly.
So it's like if you were to take, say, the average growth rate of, say, sub-adult humans, so, from infants on, it's like, okay, well, the average growth rate is this many inches per year at these ages. And you're like, oh, that can't be true because look at this guy. He's growing way faster. Like, and?
Right. Goodness. Okay, well, I don't really want to do stopping socialism. What do you think about their Heartland Institute's 14th International Conference on Climate Change? Should we check out some of this?
I'm okay with that. Let's see. What do we have? We have those three things right there.
Yeah.
One of them is coming up, so I guess we only have two things. What are they? Green fraud. Why the Green New Deal is even worse than you think. I suspect that's going to be primarily economics based and not climate.
Yeah, and this one is social benefits of lukewarming. That, oh my goodness, that just sounds terrible.
Yeah.
Okay. Joe Biden's EPA hides damning climate data. Let's take a look at that.
Yeah, I'd be interested because it's actually not that easy to hide data from like government agencies that are doing research because like they kind of have to publish, and even if they weren't to publish, I mean,
we always knew that
a FOIA request is pretty easy.
Yeah,
like a FOIA request is, especially for something that doesn't have any real like national security implications or anything. FOIA requests are basically automatic for stuff like that. Like it's almost impossible to block them.
Our weather data from the US, like anyone can go grab it. It's free. Yeah. It's really easy. Yeah. And then there's also like, you can go to the European Center, right? You can go to other nations' data centers and just get their data.
Yeah, even if the EPA we're just like, black holing everything that came out. Mm-hmm. And even if no one else was looking at US climate data,
Right.
Okay, so a small portion of the surface of the Earth is now off the table in terms of data. Guess what? We've got the whole rest of it.
Exactly. Like, it turns out that, like, the U.S. is actually real small.
I mean, on the scale of the entire Earth, yeah. As far as countries go, it's landmass-wise, it's pretty big.
Yeah,
I think it's number 4, I think. I think Russia, China, Canada are all...
Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although population-wise, only China of those 4 beats the U.S. because Canada has nobody in it. It's a bunch of empty land.
That sounds nice.
Well, until you realize that the reason it's empty is because it's completely unlivable.
That's true. Look, I don't like people, Dapper.
Okay, but do you like, minus 40? And don't ask me which scale, because it's the same on Celsius and Fahrenheit.
No.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see what the EPA is hiding. Let's find out. Oh, no.
Maybe they're hiding the socks that keep getting lost in the laundry.
Climate change is dooming humanity side. But we didn't expect them to hide data, real, legitimate data, that disprove their narrative. It's Andy with the Heartland Institute, bringing you more from climaterealism.com. Recently, the EPA brought back the climate change indicators platform under the Biden administration.
Because Trump administration banned data. It was a thing.
So this immediately strikes me as the Biden administration being more open with data.
And that's why that's bad, right? Like, please explain to me why this is a bad thing. Like, shouldn't... Also, if they were hiding it clearly not very well, right? Like...
Yeah.
Goodness. A couple years ago, there was like, how do we make sure we download all of these like decades-long data sets on the chance, not off chance either, that they were going to get deleted, like.
Yeah. Now, I want to point something out. Robert Adson says even Dapper could probably survive southern BC. And I will actually say I really like southern BC. I've had a lot of fun there when I was there in the past. But when I say Canada as a whole, I'm averaging out Canada. And when you average out Canada's landmass, it's a frozen hellscape. Like 10 months of the year. So
and also
most of Canada is just written off. I'm just not going to do it. Most of Canada. Yes, there are habitable parts that are right next to the U.S. border. That's why like 95% of the population is within like 20 miles of the U.S. border. Those numbers aren't quite accurate, but it's a huge portion of the population lives within like an hour of the U.S. border, and it's for a reason.
Yeah. Just saying, look, man, we moved to Canada. There's fewer people. They have like healthcare. That's a thing.
There's only fewer people in the parts that I don't want to go to.
Okay.
That's the thing. The only parts that I would be even broadly willing to step outside in are the parts with lots of people.
Gotcha. I don't know.
All right, let's...
I don't know if I could give up tornadoes, though, right? Like, that'd be a hard thing for me.
I'm happy with just sandstorms.
Mm-hmm.
That's the big weather event around here is sandstorms. And the most damage it does, unless you're an idiot, is like you just have to pull off the road.
Gotcha.
Because visibility will drop to like 0. So.
Okay. Yeah. It's been really stormy here. It's been... I like it.
Don't go outside because, your eyes and lungs will get cut up. But like if you're inside of a car or a house or something, you're fine.
Okay, let's see what he's got.
This time, there's a whole slew of data missing. By hiding the data, the EPA is misleading the public to prove a narrative that is simply not true. So we're going to look at what the EPA is showing and what the data that they deleted shows and show why this is a false narrative.
Oh, I think I know where this is going.
Start by looking at a graph titled Climate Change Indicators, High and Low Temperatures. Now, the earlier version contained the Dust Bowl, but the newer version seems to suppress that data. But before we check out this data, I just want to mention the Dust Bowl. The Dust Bowl...
The other worst man-made climate disaster in history?
It's like the Dust Bowl... I mean, it was a natural phenomenon in the sense that it wasn't a miracle, but like it was the direct result of human farming techniques that were not sustainable.
Yep. Also,
hey guys,
it's
soil health is a thing.
Yeah, it's blowing my mind that like we're talking about the EPA. Like EPA isn't where I go to get my data. Like I go to NOAA, right? Or like NCAR, the National Center for Atmospheric Research.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, I guess maybe like the general public might not know to go to those places, but if you like Google, hey, where can I get a temperature series for the last 100 years for my town, right? Like, it's not going to take you to the EPA.
Right. I think. Now I'm being generous to this guy here, but I want to be as generous as possible to intellectual adversaries, opponent. I don't know, but I think he might go with, since what most people that are just regular lay person without any huge interest in the details of climate science, they're going to think about the EPA when it comes to, hey, what's the data on climate science if I want to look into it. And so that's probably going to be a lot of their first stops. And so I do think that it is fair to say that the EPA does play an important role in informing public opinion about matters like that.
I guess that's fair. For anybody watching, y'all should go to the National Weather Service, at least for data in the US. That's better. For global data, I use the European Center's data. So ECMWF, European Center for the Medium Weather Forecasting, mid-range weather forecasting, I think. They have climate data going back to like 1950 for the whole globe. It's great. It's hourly
Acronyms
data.
are hard.
It's amazing.
Wow, hourly.
Yeah, and it should be free and available to the public. Maybe like not all of their forecast products, but those, like, you have to wait like 2 days to get them.
I think 2 days worth of lag is perfectly fine when you're doing long-term climate trends.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Bull was between the years of 1930 and 1936 when much of the country was dealing with heat waves. Approximately 5,000 people died from the heat waves during this time, and it's one of the hottest periods in American history. So this is, when we look at these graphs, is going to be a
recorded.
Yeah, there is always that problem, and it's a bit tricky because it's like you always have to use proxy data for if you want to go any farther back than when there were reliable records being taken, and in many places that's pretty recent. Now, fortunately, we do have some good climate proxies here and there. We can look at things like pollen types in Lake Varve deposits. We can look at ice cores. We can look at things like the isotope ratios and atmospheric contents of air bubbles in ice cores, stuff like that. There's always there's a lot of really great science going on there. But it says, hey, we had a reasonably precise thermometer. We had it outside, and we wrote down what it said every day.
Right. Well, and the important thing is to remember that, like with ice cores, that's measuring something about the average global temperature, as opposed to like what was the temperature in Utah, right?
Yeah.
Because our average global temperature is like 0 Celsius, right? Or no, it's a little more than that. But like, you know what I mean? It's. Don, apps for your phone. What do I use? I have a radar app that I use, but I like Pivotal Weather as the website. I don't know, and I use Radar Scope for my radar app. But I generally, like, if I'm going to check the weather, I'm generally going to a website, but Pivotal Weather is the website I go to. I don't know if they make an app.
The weather here is boring. It's always just hot and dry, so I barely ever check the weather.
I have feelings about the Weather Channel.
Ooh.
So the Weather Channel is fine for like, what's today's high? What's the temperature going to be like for the next week? I have some problems with ways I have seen them report disasters or forecast like hurricanes. So I have a personal vendetta there. You are by no means, no one is obligated to engage in my personal vendetta. But I boycott the Weather Channel as much as I possibly can.
Well, they've got some of that if it bleeds, it leads thing going on there, where it's like, hey, we want viewership. So, oh my God, this is going to be the worst storm of the last 50 years, and it's going to slam the entire East Coast of the United States. Get ready.
Exactly. So I've seen them engage in like I was like watching them forecast a hurricane while looking at the National Hurricane Center's forecasts, and they didn't match up. The Weather Channel was, I think what they were doing was reporting the worst case scenario as opposed to the most probable, right? And that is irresponsible because you get into what I like to call the boy who cried wolf scenario, right? So the Weather Channel, like, I won't say that they're lying. They're just often reporting the worst case scenario when it comes to an emergency. And I don't like that because that degrades public trust in forecasts for the times that it really matters. Right. So that is my personal vendetta against the Weather Channel. And I understand why they do it. They do it because they are competing for eyeballs, right? They make money. They are sustained by advertisers, whereas the National Weather Service is a public program. It's government funded, right? So the National Weather Service isn't competing for eyeballs. It isn't competing for airtime. It is just the mission of the National Weather Service is the preservation of life and property, right? So they are out there just doing their mission, and they want to give the best forecast without the hyperbole because they know that degrades public trust. So that's my rant. That's my rant, which is actually why I was really, really nervous. So secularity, like, that's a potential solution. There is a whole subfield of meteorology that is the intersection of meteorology and social science. That is not my field. I've got some friends whose that's their field. But so there's a lot of work that goes into how do we communicate the information in the best way to save the most lives, right? And so for that, I'm 100% going to default to the experts. I personally think that's a lovely idea. I just don't know about like how that goes with current research. Yeah.
But yeah, it does seem to make intuitive sense. But then again, intuition is not usually a great guide in science.
Right. And then like, how do you define what's the worst case scenario, right? Because for hurricanes, is it like, where is it going to land, right? Stuff like that. I could try. I need to get back into doing my like interview series where like talk with a scientist, because I would love to do some more stuff on that. So I will work on that. I also have a friend who spent 6 months doing science in Antarctica. I really want to bring her on.
Oh,
I just want to know what she did. I haven't talked to her about it. We were friends in undergrad.
Besides knock icicles off of her nose?
Right, exactly. So done. Pivotal weather and radar scope. That's what I would do. Oh my gosh, I'm so distracted. We have not let him talk about the EPA.
Okay. Yeah, there's a reason. It's because we're delaying. I'm aware of this.
Yeah. Okay.
A period where you see temperatures were high and heat waves were across the nation. So let's get into it. So this is the earlier version before the Biden administration. To explain how this works, let's look at the y-axis, where it goes 0.2, 0.4, 0.6, etc. A value of 0.2 indicates that up to 20% of the country is experiencing a heat wave, or 10% of the country is experiencing...
No, because you can't have 120% experiencing that.
That was
That's
my first thought. Like, that can't possibly be it.
Yeah.
I don't know what a heat wave index is, but it can't be that.
Well, I know what a climate index is, but that wouldn't, you could have negative values on that unless they mean everything out to a 0 for not a heat wave.
This indicator describes trends in unusually hot and cold temperatures across the United States. What isn't very helpful. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, I'm going to see if I can find it. So this was supposed to be EPA heat wave index, and I need to share a different screen. Here we go. I think I found it. Yeah, there we go. Okay, sorry. I can see it. Y'all can't. Let me fix that. Boop, boop. Sound effects. Okay. Area of the, okay, so this is percentage of land area. There's the 1930.
Okay, so when it was at 1 point, a little bit over 1.2, the percentage of area was still under 50.
50. Okay.
So whatever he's meaning by this, it's clearly, or whatever they're meaning by this, is clearly not what he was saying. He is wrong about that.
Yeah, so he is wrong. Let's check the heat waves indicator, maybe.
This index defines a heat wave as a period of blah, blah. I'm looking at a.
Ooh.
Let's see.
U.S. Annual Heat Wave Index, 1895 to 2020.
This.
Please open. I clicked the button, and you will go there now, please. But please, internet, don't fail me now. No, I don't want to give you feedback, EPA. We're doing science.
This index defines a heat wave as a period lasting at least 4 days with an average temperature that would only be expected to occur once every 10 years based on historical record. The index value for a given year depends on how often heat waves occur and how widespread they are, which tells us the kind of thing it's measuring, but that doesn't really have a definition. That was from the Heartland Institute.
Okay, so here we go. An index value of 0.2 could mean that 20% of the country experienced one heat wave, 10% of the country experienced two heat wave, or some other combination of frequency and area.
That's a very that's a not very granular kind of index right there. I'm not a huge fan of that.
Yeah, I'm not. I mean, I don't study heat waves, so maybe this is a standard thing in the literature, but this is this index seems strange.
But that does explain why it is that 1.2 can occur, because that means that some parts of the country experienced multiple heat waves.
So you could have 10% of the country experience 12 heat waves. Mr. Becca, yeah, like points for you. Snaps. There you go. Snaps. Because
I'm not sure what that was.
Give you a gold star.
I'm not sure what that's going to do to my mic, so I'm just going to not do any audible congratulations beyond voice. But so
that's an odd index, but okay.
One interesting thing I would like to know is what a moving average for the heat index would look like.
Yeah.
Like if we did like a 5-year running average, because you know what? I'll bet we would see a bit of a increase towards the last end of that graph. And also, this can having a high heat wave index can indicate that, you know, certain parts of the country that are normally not very hot are getting really weirdly hot that year, and then everyone else is just slowly warming up, and that doesn't really give us any kind of. It's a weird way to measure it.
It's also an important thing to note that a heat wave is fundamentally a weather event, not a climate event, right? So, I do not know off the top of my head how a global temperature increase would be expected to affect the frequency of heat waves, right? That's not, I legitimately don't know. Because, like, for example, if everything is warmer all the time, that's not a heat wave, right?
Right. That's just newly hot climate.
Exactly. That's newly hot climate. So, so I don't know enough about the like mechanics of a heat wave, sort of why is this happening or whatever have you. I don't know enough about that in order to make a comment about like, oh, this is what climate change predicts about frequency of heat waves. And I think that's something that's really common that you see with climate skepticism, right? Is looking at a weather event, right? And making a climate claim, right? Which is two different fields. Those are two different things. So for example, our best models suggest about hurricanes, right? Our best models suggest that hurricane frequency shouldn't actually change much, if at all, right? But hurricane intensity may increase, right?
Cool. So I'm checking on, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so something else that could be happening with heat waves, like, well, if the frequency of heat waves, you know, whether or not that is or isn't expected to change, right? You would also have to look at the intensity of the heat wave. And this graph doesn't tell you anything about intensity of heat waves, just like number, like just number and area, right? Anyway, or it doesn't even tell you duration, right?
No, so, it's a very, very broad metric. And another thing that I'm finding is that there isn't even one consistent definition for heat wave used across the United States, and a number of places use a number of different baseline temperatures to determine when a heat wave is. Some of them just use an absolute value that doesn't change. So in some places, like in the northeastern United States, apparently, if it goes over 90 degrees, that's when you start the counter for whether or not there's going to be, this counts as a heat wave. Whereas in, say, Southern California, you start at 100 degrees, and these are Fahrenheit, right? But then in other parts of the world, they use a average temperature for the past 30 or 40 years, which if you're measuring those kinds of things, then you wouldn't actually expect to see significant spikes in numbers of heat waves if the climate is warming, because if you're using a running average and that running average is going up, then your heat waves aren't going to be more likely. But since that's not the case in the United States, you probably would expect to see an increase in heat waves in the long term if people don't update their definitions.
Right.
But there's no guarantee that they won't or haven't, and it's
it's
a whole weird thing. Why not just look at the actual temperature data?
Right.
Just look at the temperature data.
Right, exactly. So like heat wave index is complicated. We can just look at global average temperatures. Like it's much simpler. Okay, so let me switch back to the video and get it to where y'all can hear it so that we can get back to whatever he's going to say. Now that we know what we're looking at. Okay. Also, don't you love the like loaded language of the title? Like Joe Biden's EPA hides damning climate data, right? Like that's
it is obviously very loaded, but then again, I
it
always
is the
see anyone on the internet who opposes the current administration will like to tack the president's name onto whatever alphabet soup agency they're complaining about in the title of their videos. So like, yeah, it's loaded, but on the other hand, I'm like, I honestly can't expect anything else, especially given how many articles that read something like George Bush or Trump's DOD or EPA or, DOE or all of those things. So it's one of those things where I wish no one would do it, but I wouldn't say this guy is special in doing it.
No, he's not special. I just so often really strange loaded language is used. I don't know. I especially notice it when people talk about pseudoscience. I guess it's not, you see it in young earth creationism and you're just like, I like to point out, like, do you see what they're doing? They're priming you to think X because of blah. And I think it's worth just stating outright what people
are doing. It's definitely worth noting. The fact that it's not unusual doesn't make it not a bad idea, right? Fair. We should try to avoid loaded language, even though everyone's doing it. It's sort of like if everyone's jumping off the bridge, it doesn't make it a good idea.
Yeah. And I guess like you could say that like my title is a little like loaded. I didn't do like destroyed with facts and logic, but it's like debunking Heartland Institute, climate, whatever.
Well, the destroyed with facts and logic is the kind of thing I actually expect to see from pseudoscientists. Most actual like pro science content that I see usually just use the words debunk, which basically says this person's wrong, I'm going to tell you why. Or it just uses some title that has to do with the topic, and then you click on it and you realize, okay, you're responding to someone who's getting this wrong.
Yeah.
So I much more associate that level of clickbait with pseudoscience, which might be why they're so popular. Maybe it is time for science-minded people to get clickbaitier, but it feels dirty.
It feels so dirty, though.
I know.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's play. Let's see what he has to say.
Seeing 2 heat waves. Now let's look at the 1930s. We can see that value rose up to above 1.2.
By the way, do you like that? That's basically the graph we just looked at.
Oh, yeah. I think this is exactly that graph.
Okay.
Indicates that much of the country experienced heat waves and part of the country had more than one heat wave. So while this doesn't indicate that the entire country dealt with a heat wave, it indicates that some areas dealt with multiple heat waves. Now, when we look at modern day in the 2000s, 2010s, we can see it's not even close to the 1930s. Now let's look at the data that Joe Biden's EPA put out. Here's climate change indicator.
That's the same graph. It has the same.
This is a different graph.
Oh, never mind then.
This is a different graph. This is percentage of land area. This was what was on the homepage. That was the first graph.
Oh, right. Yeah.
This is a completely different index, but we found that graph right there. It was just on it.
His complaint is that this one doesn't have the heat wave index.
I don't know.
That's the only difference. That's the only thing I can think that he's complaining about.
Yeah, it's a different graph.
Although I don't like
the other
calling
graph
these.
Is still there.
I don't like calling these things smooth, like hot daily highs smooth. Tell me how many years you're running, or how many whatever you're running the running average over, so I know what's actually happening. I really don't like that.
I will say on the EPA's website, in the description, there is a full citation.
That's good.
So you could go to the paper. And I bet the figure caption should tell you what the smoothed means.
Maybe he'll be really awesome and actually scroll down and we'll get to see the figure caption. What do you think?
I think not. We can go look at it. I found that graph already if we want to take a look. Okay.
High and low temperatures under the Joe Biden era. We can see that they've changed the way this chart works. Instead of showing heat wave index, they're showing percent of land area. So now what they're trying to do is basically show that, oh, look, maybe more of the country is dealing with a heat wave. But if you actually consider the
No, see, this isn't heat waves. These aren't heat waves.
This has nothing to do with heat waves.
This is hot daily highs.
Right.
And hot daily lows.
This is literally when we were earlier complaining, why don't you just look at the temperatures instead of this weird metric?
Yeah.
That's this.
Yeah. And this is showing that there is an increase in the area, right? So what's actually interesting here to me, I don't know if you can see it, Dapper, is that the lows are getting noticeably higher. Right?
Yeah, I did notice that, which was not the case. I mean, they met parity around the 70s, and then they've been kind of creeping up past the highs up into the 2000s. Whereas before that, they were significantly lower every year, except for a little bit in the late 40s.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So...
I don't know why this guy is complaining that a more useful graph is now being used, but that's still not hiding data.
Well, and again, the other graph is still on the website. We just looked at it. So we found
it's not gone anywhere.
Easier way to communicate stuff, and now you're mad, and now it's hiding data, climate evidence, right?
How dare you use more useful and more intuitive metrics?
Amount of heat waves that the country was dealing with in the 1930s from the heat wave index perspective, it was greatly higher than today. Quickly going back to the old data, we can see that, again, while maybe some of the country is experiencing more heat.
It's just different. It's still available. And they updated it. They updated the same index in 2021.
Waves than previously, the actual number of heat waves in the 1930s was greatly higher. The reason they changed this kind of thing is that the old data...
Because the old data was less intuitive?
Yeah. It's harder to figure out what the heck is going on with the old data.
Also, again, please, you're going to sit here and by just showing me a graph from a website, by not going to the paper that's cited, you're going to discern and apply motivations to the author, right? They did this because, right? Science always changes, so we can't trust it.
Which is great because it's actually the reason that it's more trustworthy than most other things in human experience. Because when it gets something wrong, it fixes it. Whereas most other areas are just you know what? Let's just stay wrong.
Yeah. Being wrong is great. Okay. I couldn't let him just ramble without interrupting him there, because you're going to say something as though it is fact, which is just your opinion, right? You're going to attribute something to the motivation of the EPA or the authors. See, they're doing this to do X, Y, Z, right? Ugh.
Yeah.
You're just making it up. You're just making things up at this point.
And the weird thing is, I can't imagine ever thinking to myself, gee, I wonder whether or not climate data would indicate that global warming is happening, and then deciding that what I would like to do is look up a weirdly defined heat wave index metric.
Right.
That would never be my go-to. Just coming to this out of the blue.
Global temperatures.
Yeah. I would like to do a moving average of global temperatures over, as long as we have data for.
Exactly. A great one I like to look at, a great image you can look at is how Arctic sea ice has changed in the last 30 years. And that's a really clear visual. Rebecca says they just look for charts that don't go up. Yeah, probably.
That might actually just be it. Yeah. I found a chart and it doesn't have a weird little uptick at the end. So this must be the most accurate.
This must be it. Yeah. Okay.
shows that the 1930s had more heat waves than today. But they don't want you to know that, so they're not going to show that. They
do show it. It's 2 graphs. It took me 30 seconds to find that.
Yeah. I don't
show a different way of interpreting the data, which devalues how hot the 1930s was and makes it seem like today is much hotter.
No. False. No.
Actually, can we look again at that second graph? Can you pull it up?
I can. Okay. So this was the chart we just looked at. This is the heat wave index.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, hold on. It's just that if you land on the home page, here we go.
10 charts climate scientists don't want you to see.
Yeah. If you land on the home page, this is what you see.
Oh, hey, look in the 30s. There's a big bump there. I wonder what that is.
Big old bump.
Weird. Gosh.
I'm
trying not to swear at this point on your channel, and it's not being very easy.
Smooth is the 9-year weighted average.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty good, 9-year.
Yeah, and by weighted is, I'm guessing weighted means one of two things. When you deal with data that exists on a map, on a globe, you often will weight your data by the cosine of latitude. Otherwise, higher latitudes are arbitrarily weighted more because you have denser data at higher latitudes, right?
Yeah.
Or they mean weighted based off of there's sometimes that we know this station was broken, so don't look at it for this year, but look at this other station instead. Yeah. So it's probably one of those two things when they say weighted. I'm sure it's in the paper, right?
Yeah.
But okay. Yeah. I don't know.
So basically what I'm getting from this is during the 30s, there were more short periods of exceptional temperatures than there are now. But it is still, on average, overall, hotter now than it was in the 30s.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see how that's like an impossible thing. Like, that doesn't strike me as something that's contradictory or something that someone's trying to hide.
Right, and the other thing that he didn't demonstrate, right, that he never, and I don't think ever would, is, okay, so here are two different ways of looking at data. Why is one better than the other? Yeah. Right? You would need to be able to justify that empirically.
Oh,
right?
I know why one is better. Because one of them looks more like he wants it to look.
Oh, I didn't think of that. Because that's not how scientists think.
Yeah, you have to think like someone who wants to confirm his or her bias and who is not very interested in what the truth is.
So this week, I'm actually participating in a virtual conference. I gave my presentation yesterday. It was a whole thing. And like, I'm really excited about my work, right? But I have a hypothesis, right? Which is the basis of my PhD, right? Mm-hmm. So like, I have a hypothesis. I have reasons that I have that hypothesis, but it's not proven. And so anytime somebody asks me, okay, so why do you think this is? Or what do you think the role of the ocean is in this? I'm like, okay, I'll tell you, but, right, warning, right, caveat, this is my hypothesis. I don't know for sure, right? I'm desperately trying to make sure that everybody I'm talking to knows we have stepped out of things that I know and can demonstrate and into things that I am actively testing and could very much be wrong on, right? And that is something that you have to do as a scientist, right? In order to communicate your science to other scientists. And so that's one of the things that drives me nuts about pseudoscience communicators like this joker. I'm struggling to not curse too. It's my own channel. Like this joker, right? Who are all like, oh, they just make these grandiose claims and don't back it up. And like you were saying earlier, right? You know, it must take 10 times longer to debunk some outrageous claim than it does to make an outrageous claim of someone who is uninterested in actually participating in scientific discourse.
So there's actually like a rule of thumb with a name that goes around in sort of like the debunking world, and it's the BS asymmetry principle.
Okay.
Which states that on average it takes about 4 times as long to correct pseudoscience nonsense as it does to spout pseudoscience nonsense.
I believe that.
Which I have found to be broadly correct. Generally speaking, if I'm responding in depth to like a video or something, my response videos tend to be about 4 times. They tend to be about like 80% me talking about whatever, 20% the person I'm responding to making claims.
Yeah.
Which is one of the ways that that helps me get away with using so many videos under fair use, is because one of the tests is how much of the content is actually someone else's copyrighted material versus how much is yours. And when it's 20% versus 80%, well, that's a vast majority me.
Right. And that's what really drives me nuts, is anytime somebody claims the like, science journals are rigged, you can't publish dissenting opinions. Like, no, you absolutely can. There are knockdown, drag-out fights that go on in journals, right?
Yep.
And at conferences, oh my gosh. And at conferences, they give you wine. Right? It's great. Sometimes you see scientists almost go at it. It's amazing.
But yeah, there's always contradictory opinions being published in journals. It's
exactly
all the time. It's just, you have to be able to support it well enough for it to not just be dismissed outright for being completely bonkers.
Yeah, and that's, I was last week or the week before that we were doing debunking like Matt Powell, and like what I said to him was, you have to put in the work if you want to really participate in this discourse. That's like for you and me and Erica and most of the science friends, like this is by and large our hobby, right? This isn't, at least this is debunking pseudoscience is my hobby, you know? And this isn't me doing science. This isn't me being a scientist. This is, I think I have a responsibility to put out good information to combat the bad. But the people putting out the bad information, like, don't do the work to do this professionally, right? They don't do the work to be a scientist, to get to go to conferences, to publish in papers, right? That takes work.
But then they lie about what's going on. Like, you'll get ones like Andrew Snelling, who's a young Earth creationist geologist, and every once in a while, he'll publish a completely conventional geology paper that has, standard methodology and everything, and comes to, I mean, not always completely uncontroversial opinion or conclusions, but never conclusions that are just, like, as bonkers as the Earth is 6,000 years old. As
bonkers as hydroplate.
Yeah. Well, no, I think he's a catastrophic plate tectonics, which is only
slightly better.
It's still several orders of magnitude out of whack in terms of thermodynamics, but it's like a few fewer orders of magnitude beyond the realm of possibility.
Yeah.
So it's still completely off the wall, but it's sort of like, if you bounce something and it went off the wall, this only went 100 feet instead of, 300 feet off the wall.
Right. Yeah. So that's.
But yeah, so you get those guys, and those, a lot of them actually have made statements like, oh yeah, I went to school specifically to try to get rid of evolution or to prove that climate change isn't real. It's like, okay, so you're admitting that you went to school and got a degree in order to commit academic fraud later on with extra letters after your name.
Right. Well, and if like your goal, so that's like in a completely different field, but like over at Digital Hammurabi, Dr. Josh Bowen talks about going from when he started his PhD program at Johns Hopkins. This was in like Assyriology, right? So it's in the classics, not in science, but
it's still a scholarly field.
It's still a scholarly field. It's still academia. And he talks about like his intent was to go in and like he described as like going into the lion's den, right? I'm going to go in and learn the stuff and then, you know, translate it back to fundamentalist Christian or whatever it was, right?
Right.
But then had to actually learn the stuff, and that like changed his mind, right? So if you're going in to a like regular university to get a degree in geology or a degree in biology, I don't really care what your purpose is for getting that degree, but you need to honestly pursue it, right? You can't like honestly pursue it. If there are problems, find them, please point them out, you know. Collect like I've said in a lot of my younger creationism videos, like if you can demonstrate that the decay constant can change, please collect your Nobel Prize, right? And scientists aren't going to be mad if you change a paradigm. Like that would be really cool, but you have to do the work to change the paradigm.
They will be mad if you do things like lie about what your actual findings are, and then just pretend that the science supports something that it doesn't, which is what we see with a lot of creationist PhDs. We'll do things like, I have Andrew Snelling on the mind because it came up today, where he just lies about the angles of the cross-bedding in the Coconino Sandstone to pretend that it's a marine deposit.
Oh, great.
He just straight up just lies about the numbers. It's like, I measure the angles at this. And it's like, okay, but every published result has other numbers, so...
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Okay, team. I am actually fading quickly. I am getting... It's not late, but like my eyes are burning and I'm getting really tired. And I don't want to listen to that. Oh, okay. Well, it's not late. It's like 8:15 here. I have no reason to be tired, and yet here we are. But I go between an hour and an hour and a half, so we're right in that window. So I think I'll go ahead and end it here. I also don't want to listen to him talk anymore.
Yeah, I think we can come to the conclusion that putting a different graph that's more useful on the front page is not the same thing as hiding climate data.
Right. I'm sorry, Phil. I'm glad you popped in, but the VOD will be up immediately. So if you wanna suffer through some of this,
I was honestly expecting a much more significant event. Like I was thinking, like, oh, you know, like they took down a bunch of graphs, or they've shifted where a bunch of graphs that are on their website start and end, because that is a thing that I have seen groups, including government agencies, do, which is, you know, pick the start and end points for graphs to make it look the way that someone wants it to. You know, like I've seen that. Like I've seen a few agencies, and I don't want to currently get super into it, but do things like, hey, look at how much this kind of safety has improved since we started this program. It's like, okay, but you're starting exactly on the start date of that program. What's the previous decade like? And it's like, oh, it's the same trend the whole way through. So you didn't actually help measurably.
Gotcha. I actually thought what they were going to do was like a data set went from version 3 to version 4, and version 4 was like more showed climate change more than version 3. That's where I thought that was going.
That would have been interesting too, because then you could at least ask questions like, why do we think this version set is better? And you could make arguments why. Like you could at least make an argument.
Right. That would have been a much more interesting discussion. But no, this is just
a different metric was put front and center. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, team. So on that note, I will let you all get back to your Wednesday evening. Thank you so much for coming to hang out. I will drop Dapper's link to his channel in the description as soon as we hang up here.
Much appreciated.
And
linguistic content coming out tomorrow.
Ooh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
And I will see you guys. There'll be an edited video out on Sunday. I'm going to start my like Weather 101 series, and then live stream next week. So I'll see you guys later. Bye, team.
Bye.